Destiny of Manufacturing podcast, powered by the Precision Metal Forming Association. I am Dean Phillips. I am the technical director here at PMA, and I am proud to be here because I have with me, what does that symbol mean? Well, it means Mursix. And it is, of course, I have the privilege of having Joe Barr on who is, of course, the plant manager there, and is a tremendously knowledgeable person about manufacturing and all things manufacturing related, and has done a tremendous job over there with the training and everything else on board there. So I want to say, Joe, welcome.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So, Joe, right away, we always like to start off with, what is your big takeaway for the next 5 years?
Well, I think we definitely see, a resurgence of manufacturing in the States here. We see some onshoring take place. Lots of concerns with global supply chain interruptions, tariffs, economies, all of those things. I think as we see some resurgence of manufacturing, we also have to be very cognizant of the labor impact. We see now some efforts being placed in schools for vocational trades, some focus back in that area. And as we do that, the efforts that are being done today in middle schools and in high schools, that's going to translate into our future workforce with, such let's say the combination of what they call the Great Resignation. We have lots of people in those retirement ages coming in the coming years, and our next generation of workers don't necessarily have the same foundational principles or backgrounds of vocational training, hands-on work that maybe we would have had in the past. So in the next 5 years, it's going to be an interesting landscape of the new workers coming in, their contributions, their experiences, and how they can pick up the pieces from those of us that have been in the business a long time and are starting to sunset, so to speak.
That's a great point that you bring up there, and I really appreciate your comments, because what we've done in the past may not be the simple path to the future either, because, and I can speak firsthand, I've had, my son was putting together a bed, and I was like, I'm going to let him do it, because, and he struggled with it and I said, it's because I haven't given him enough time to work with certain tools and things like that. So I think that that's something we have to look at, is that kids aren't as exposed today as maybe you or I were when we were kids growing up, with tools, with tape measures, even just as simple as that. It's not something that they're as exposed to as we perhaps were. And I was really encouraged. We just had an event down here in Tennessee. We had a tour for STEM students to go to a few of the colleges for engineering. And it was really encouraging to see kids so passionate about STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, to be exposed to that, and to hear them talk about robotics competition that they're involved in, or something that they 3D printed. It was really encouraging to me. Have you seen stuff like that? And how does that make you feel?
Yeah, for sure. So, over the last, let's say, 10 or 12 years, I've spent quite a bit of energy, volunteering on local boards for our career center, School of Technology, STEM classes back in the school system that I grew up in, and my kids have all went through. So it's always good to see that there's some spark, that manufacturing, technology, vocation's not dead, so to speak. But it's interesting too, though, that if you think about technology and you think about our kids really don't know any different. They're quick to be able to fix your phone or program the remote or do whatever it is. And I reflect on myself that we didn't have computers when I was in high school. There was maybe an electronic word processor, and then there was something that was like a Mac publisher that they used for the school newspaper, but that was about it.
Mhm.
Nowadays, kids don't know any different. So as much as they may come up short on that practical experience of hands-on and knowing which end of the wrench to use, on the other side, the technology is second nature to them. So now if you
Oh yeah.
think about something like a Mastercam, AutoCADs, the 3D printing, those things, you can generate some G code in a matter of minutes, where it used to be we had to write it by hand
Right.
and get the calculator out and trig some stuff out to try and figure out what our angles were going to be. So I think that there's some positives coming in with the next generation of workers as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because I often will bring that up when people talk about some of the challenges with today's workforce is that they have a different skill set completely. And I grew up, I was fortunate if went to a vocational high school and we had some early computers. We had a Sinclair, which was a tactile keyboard. And when I went to college, we worked on an Apple IIe, but those were the early days, really, of a lot of this. Whereas kids today have been immersed in it from you know every day. You see a kid, and I mean when I say kid, I'm talking about child can't even speak. 1 to 2 years, maybe 1 to 2 years old, and to distract the kid, their parents will hand them the phone here, and the kid already is getting used to it, even though they don't understand. But it's their formative years of learning all this stuff. They have a very different skill set, and I will encourage people sometimes when we talk about workforce development, and we talk about this all the time, is that if you're going to try and hire somebody, you need to figure out to live in their world of what they want to experience on the floor. Do you have technology? Are you embracing it? Uh, and do you use things like QR codes for your standard work instructions? Something like, and I'll lead this into you for the another part is to talk about some of the technology improvements in manufacturing. Uh, what do you see coming, and what have you been involved with? I think I already know this answer, but if you could tell me a little bit, into our audience, a little bit about things that you've been involved in technology wise.
I think back over the years of, my career goes back to Borg Warner and General Motors and Magna Powertrain and Metaldyne, and over the years we've tried different solutions of whether it be a YouTube channel for training and little video clips, electronic work instructions that are on monitors at the workstation, even bin picking and confirmation that it's walking you through the work instruction, and you have to make confirmation steps to make sure that you follow the sequence of events like you're supposed to. Where it's going, I see that still being out there, probably more from my view, the continued down the YouTube video clip, real-time training, so it's not just so dry with a PowerPoint presentation or just an Excel work step sheet, but that video learning, to be able to have some interactiveness. I got to see AI coming in strong, that you get to ask questions, and now it's the chatbot version of the world that you can ask some questions and you can get information on command. And then very specifically, there's efforts out there, at least in our world, to try and capture some of the tribal knowledge and some of the experience, and capture that and then put it in an AI model. So now you can have an interactive database with a chatbot to be able to troubleshoot, solve problems, access information more quickly. Human nature is pretty funny. If I have a book at the end of the department that gives me all the answers, and I have a question, I may or may not walk all the way down there and try and open that book up, try and find what page I'm looking for. You know, if you could just ask the question and you get the answer, that's got some power to it, especially if you don't necessarily know where to look. You know,
Yeah.
if you got a volume of books and you know you can find that answer in there somewhere, you might just take the gut shot and says, you know, I think I can figure it out. And you may or may not get it right, or it may take you a long time to do it. So I think with the power of technology, the power of AI, the fact that they can have these chat bots that are accessing information in kind of an interactive way, I sure think that that's got a lot of power in the future for us.
Yeah. In many different ways too. I can foresee a lot of this technology being used. I think back to my days when I started in engineering, and the books that I had, as you're talking about, the reference materials that you have with formulas and bolt sizes and this type and grade of bolts. You have all of that at your disposal now, and your phone. It's incredible how quickly you can find the specific formula you need, even if you know and you're very well versed in those engineering books. And that's a big part of when we go to college. A lot of times we're learning about those aspects of where to find the answers. I think so many times we think of going to school, it's learning the answers to questions. No, it's learning to know where to find answers for questions. And I think that's really an incredibly more powerful thing that we have today with technology. Can you tell us now, the first time, to be perfectly honest, Joe and I had met briefly, whether Joe remembers this or not, was at the Smart Manufacturing Conference in Pittsburgh this past year. And I was fortunate enough to hear him talk about the technology when it comes to AI and aspects of utilizing chat for these functions. And even more importantly, using a voice first element of that. Can you tell us a little bit about how that interacts with people and what you've seen with people's willingness to adapt to it when it's a voice first application?
Yeah, so we have something here called Murray Mentor, and Murray is the family name of Mursix. And the interesting part is that you know you have curiosity, you have apprehension. You know, they're not exactly sure what the end goal is. Is this, you know, is it the robots are taking over the world and they're going to take my job? You know, we've had we put together a core team of what we call subject matter experts. So we have, you know, operators, maintenance, tool makers, you know, so all of all of the invested folks to try and put some models together. And we've been doing these voice recordings of problem solving activities that take place on the floor, and then combining that with taking some you know, documents like machine manuals and those types of things, some customer problem logs, and really trying to build a library, so to speak, specific to our business. And you know, I think that we're about 200 recordings in at this point, where we're going through, and then it's cataloging. So a lot of work to be done yet to see just how beneficial it can be. But you know, the whole fact that you're talking to an AI, you know, entity, chatbot, whatever you want to call, and you know, the interesting part is when I call them on my phone, I have a natural inclination to say thank you. I'm talking to a robot, but I'm being courteous like it's a person. That's an interesting and kind of an eerie feeling. But at the same time, it's got a personality that it gives you a little sass back in return. So it's an interesting journey so far, and sure will be interesting to see where it takes us.
Yeah, for those people that are very concerned about where this is going to lead us, I think it's the same problem people had years ago with computers. Oh, it's going to be taking over everything. No, it's become a tool for us, and I think that's where people have to understand is that this is a tool for where we're going. Can you give us you talked a little bit about your background, but can you give us a little more insight into how did you get involved in manufacturing?
So I grew up in a family business. I'm an electrician by trade. My family owned an appliance company, washers, dryers, refrigerators. And because of that, all of those appliances consumed electricity. So then my dad became an electrical contractor as well. So I kind of grew up in the family business. But here in Muncie, Indiana, or Yorktown, Indiana, it's in the Midwest. So we had here local to us, we had Borg Warner Transmission. So the transmission and transfer case plant. We had New Venture Gear, which was a GM powertrain facility for manual transmissions. We also had the Chrysler facility in Newcastle, Indiana. That was the chassis division. You had Ford Connorsville, you had Allison Transmission, Indianapolis. So lots of manufacturing in this area. So I went to Ball State for manufacturing engineering technology. I always knew I wanted to do something hands-on. I like technology. I like, I like that aspect, and that led me into manufacturing. So, I started off as an engineering co-op at Borg Warner when I was in college. I was a machine operator at a factory called Max, and now it's Honeywell. They make like burner valve assemblies, burner tubes, that type of stuff. And started my first job at New Venture Gear as a production supervisor back in the late 90s, mid 90s, I guess. And, really, just continued ever since. I went between operations and engineering back and forth. It's funny because I liked engineering because once you fix the machine one time, you never had to talk to it again, right? It took the people aspect out of it, but somehow I kept being in a operations leadership role along the way, and really it's led a great career for me. I've been very, very fortunate that I got to basically stay in my area throughout my entire career. Although there were times I was going to chase a company and move from one place to another. In the end, I got to just stay right here and allow my kids to grow up in the same community that I grew up in, and it provided a good, stable environment for my family. And for myself, I've got to see and experience lots of things, build new plants, win new business, launch new processes and technologies and all of the things. So it's just been a fantastic career dating back now to 1991.
Mm-hmm. I think it's great to hear your story about why it's been important to you, because I think everybody's experience in manufacturing is different, but I think the commonality that most people have is that I never hear anybody tell me how they didn't enjoy being in manufacturing, being part of that solution, being part of everything that drives our country, drives the world for that matter. Understanding technology and manufacturing is a huge part of that. And I think sometimes we lose that element in when we're talking about it, is how vital it's been and how important it's been for many people's lives. I guarantee you could walk through the plant and talk to people, and they'll tell you how much it's changed their life to be involved in manufacturing. And
Yeah, it's
it's
pretty
great to
neat
hear that.
especially from the automotive world, that when you can think back to the products that you've been responsible for or supported in one way or the other, and you see a car going down the road and you say, hey, all of the suspension parts on that car came out of Newcastle, Indiana. That transfer case, that four-wheel drive unit came out of Muncie, Indiana, and then was assembled in Fort Wayne. You can make that association of products and your contribution to the community that most people really just can't appreciate enough.
Right, right. I think that's a good way to put it. Tell tell us a little bit when you talk about technology and talk about, I know that you have a wonderful training center there at your facility. Tell us a little bit about how that comes to be, though, because I don't think that that's just something that just happens spur of the moment. That's something that was well thought out, and you saw a need you had to have to fill. Did you find that because today it's harder to recruit people, that you needed to do more training from within?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when you look at the workforce here, So primarily, if we talk about progressive stamping, um, the world's not making more of us, right? So when you're recruiting in and you have a large percentage of your workforce that's got higher seniority or on the on the coming years of retirement, it says that okay, not only do we need to recruit replacement workforce, but somehow we have to shorten the skills and learning gap. That time is pretty tough one to beat. So
Yeah.
if you have somebody that's been doing a job for 25 years and you recruit somebody new, I don't have 25 years for them to get to the same skill level. So the
No.
things that we do, we have to figure out how do we shorten that skills learning curve? How do we give better resources um, to ensure that both the individual can be successful as well as the company? So then it's through the application of all things, all tools in the toolbox to try and help that person learn, experience, become competent, get feedback, be supported, all of those things. And yeah, I mean it's really out of a matter of survival that we utilize all resources available to us with the ultimate goal of helping that individual be successful.
Yeah. And I think that most people appreciate that too. I think most people that when they're coming into the company, knowing that that you're investing in them, that it adds a value to retention and recruitment. And certainly the numbers bear that out when you look at those. What what technologies do you see coming that are going to help in manufacturing over the next 5 years, let's say?
Well, for sure, I think that, and uh, as it's been being employed, the use of automation continues to be one as we combat for rising healthcare costs, rising wages. Companies have to survive, and we have to separate the tasks that are just, let's say, routine and mundane. That if we can employ technology to help us on the throughput side, and then use the skills, the resources, the people to do those more knackful tasks or those that require some more some more intuitiveness, that balance to allow us to stay competitive and compete in the marketplace. Other things, a good example was this morning, we were talking about a press, and I have a lube that is really, really important because it's a draw. So generates a lot of heat. Well, unfortunately, that lube also puts a little bit of a coating on my part, and it makes it harder to get my e-coat to stick. So we talked about some infrared thermometers to be, shooting on the part or on the detail on the punch, so we can see if that temperature rises, and we can predict a failure, so we can stop before we go too far and make a bad part. So I think it continues to be the application of technologies, sensor costs, PLC costs, computer costs, those things continue to drop. And it's how can we apply those? Because maybe in the past, I would rely on my operators' observation skills and intuitiveness to be paying attention to the process. But now that I don't necessarily have somebody with 25 years experience running that job, now maybe I need to employ some low cost sensor devices to be able to monitor the process as I go to stop a defect before it can be made.
Right. That's that's an area that it's interesting you say that, because I think that we don't always realize that we can employ sensors in so many ways to try and improve our processes. Uh, for years, I was always banging that drum of, look, the cost of a sensor is so minimal in the cost of crashing a die or developing and producing bad parts and having to scrap them. Uh, I'm glad to hear somebody, it's refreshing to hear somebody like yourself having that view of hey, the cost of sensors, PLCs, they're all coming down, and they're more available to people at a lower cost entry point, that people can get into that technology to improve their process and potentially save themselves thousands and thousands of dollars. So that's
Yeah, I
tremendous.
mean, we have another project. We partner with Purdue quite a bit because Lafayette's only about an hour and 45 minutes from here. We have a project where we have some energy monitors on the line wires of a press. We also have a stethoscope so it can listen to the press as it cycles. We're trying to do some overlays. And one interesting part from our just trying to be competitive and to the bottom line is energy costs. So, you know, something as simple as paying attention to what's on and what's off and what its relationship is to our utility costs. You know, I think Indiana is it's a utility regulated state. And I think that they're in for a 6% increase in our utility costs. So the question is how do we employ technology across all things? It's not just about making parts. It's not just about training our people. It's also about things just like energy management to try and make sure that we have the most competitive profile that we can.
Excellent. Joe, I could talk to you here for hours, but I know you're a busy man, and I really do appreciate you taking the time with me today. Our guest today, of course, from Mursix has been Joe Barr. I really appreciate you, sir, and all of your insight. Thank you for being here today with us. Tell everybody how they can reach you.
Well, so I'm on LinkedIn, which I'll share my LinkedIn profile that Dean can post in the information. Pretty easy to find here at Mursix Corporation in Yorktown, Indiana. So jbarr@mursix.com.